27 years, through the terms of 8 governors and 6 state senate presidents, J. Howard Myers of Martinsburg and Berkeley County was a power in the Senate, as much by reason of the force of his personality and his character as by reason of the important position of Clerk of the Senate. Mr. Myers, how is the legislative process today? How does it compare with the process when you came here? Has there been any change?
Oh, it's much more efficient. I can do a much better job with less personnel. I think it's improved tremendously since I came here. As you may remember that in '45, when I came here, the total budget for the biennium was something like $60 million, and now it's something over close between $200 and $300 million for 1 year. So,
Mr. Myers, how many bills are introduced in an average session?
Someplace between 400 and 500.
Has that number grown steadily over the years?
Not appreciably, no. But you must remember when I first came here, it was only met every 2 years, and of course all the bills that were introduced then were covered a 2-year period. Now they introduce them each year, so I suppose you would say that it has increased, because we'll get, or did when I was here, with the latter part of my tenure here, we had between 400 and 500 each year.
Is the effectiveness of a senator as a representative of his people influenced very much by the force of his character, his personality? Does this enter in very much?
Of course it does. It's just a selling job. If he can convince someone else that he's right, and he has a personality to do it, of course. That has a lot to do with it. That's how one becomes, as a rule, becomes president of the Senate or Speaker of the House. He knows his business, and he has a personality to sell it.
Nice guys finish first.
That's right.
Here in the Senate chamber, is there any order or pattern to the seating?
Well, the minority, of course, is seated on the left-hand side of the chamber, majority on the right. The majority floor leaders are seated in front on either side of the aisle, and usually they're surrounded by chairman of Judiciary, Finance, the other important committees. Other than that, it's a matter of placing 2 senators from one district next to each other, or if they do not wish that, of course, we don't do it, but generally speaking, that's the custom so that they can lend advice and support to their colleague from their district.
Who determines the seating arrangement? The clerk?
The clerk consults the senators about what would please them most, and then he does it, yes.
I notice as I look down toward the president's chair, the clock, and I'm reminded of the times when the clock was stopped. Mr. Parsons mentioned this in the House. Was the clock ever stopped here?
Oh, it was stopped on, I'd say, almost innumerable times. But with the advent of court decisions some years ago, providing the bill could not be passed after 12 o'clock on the last day of the session, why that custom went out of vogue. So they don't do that anymore.
Does the president ever have difficulty controlling the membership here?
He never has since I've been here.
What about the galleries? Any difficulty there?
No, I think I recall some time ago that it was not very pleasant during the consideration of the Fireballs bill back in, I think it was 49 it was. But we went through without any serious incident. The galleries were packed, they were noisy and unruly, but we had no trouble.
Has the Senate President ever cleared the galleries during your time?
No, I've heard him threaten to, but that was just a threat.
Threat was generally sufficient.
That's right.
What's the hottest issue you ever saw reach the Senate floor during your time?
It was the Fireballs bill. Fireballs bill, human rights bill.
Does the individual senator have much individual power as a member of state government?
Oh, he has a lot of muscle. You must understand that senators have, numerically speaking, 3 times the power of a member of the House, and the administration or the party wants to lose their vote or their influence on any bill, and of course they have muscle, they have influence. The departments, I think, look up to them and consider their suggestions, and yes, I think they have a great deal.
Has the workload of the senator grown steadily during your time?
Oh, the workload's grown, but the tools by which you do it have also kept pace with it, and I don't think it's too much more difficult now than it was when I first came here.
How would you characterize the individual senator in terms of the way he performs?
Generally speaking, I would be amazed at the good job they do. I don't see how you could get a much better bunch of men together, pick 34 or 6 people out of the state and hand-pick them. I don't think one would do any better than the public does. I think they do well. And they represent their constituents. As you remember, the people elect them, and they have to be men of influence in their community.
Has the membership of the Senate generally reflected the political division in the state?
Oh, only on purely political bills in here have ever I seen any retributions or things like that from one party to another. They do a little bit of sword crossing occasionally, but it doesn't amount to anything. It's all in good faith and good humor.
What is the numerical breakdown by party of the Senate right now?
I'm not sure. I'm not chair anymore. There are 12 new ones here.
During your time, I was curious, and it's a...
So it was 24 to 10.
24-10?
The last I was here.
I was curious, have there ever been members of the Senate who are members of a party other than the Democrat or Republican parties?
We've had none here. We've had none here.
Now, does the member of the Senate have an office other than his desk here?
No, not unless he's chairman of committee.
How can he function without a private office, or is this a problem?
It is a problem. And they need something like that desperately.
What happens if a senator were to come down here and decide it's going to be a nice 4 years, time to spend in Charleston, and he decided not to do anything?
He just served one term.
Would he be disciplined by the Senate?
No. I would say not.
He could be, I suppose.
He could be, but I would say not. He just would serve one term, and he'd be ineffective in anything he did. He wouldn't be good for his district, and they'd soon find it out.
Has the Senate ever gotten rid of a member of the Senate during the time you were here?
No, sir. Not in the 27 years I was here.
I believe they did recently, didn't they, following conviction?
Oh, you
our senators.
Speaking of Senator Smith?
Bernard Smith,
yes.
That was after your time.
That's right.
Mr. Myers, I don't notice any electronic voting machines. How does the Senate vote?
Well, they vote, we call their names here. We have no electronic voting machine. Of course, on non-controversial bills, we use an abbreviated roll call, which means without objection, we call the name of the first member on the list, and the president's name. If they vote aye, the bill's passed. And generally speaking, you pass 4 or 5 bills a minute that way. Non-controversial bills.
And if anyone has any objection, he objects to the process.
Correct. He would objection, and you have to call their name.
I see. How do you view the Senate's role in the whole process of government? Is it the conservative arm that is a restraining influence?
I'd say it was when, excuse me, when I first came here. I think the Senate now is, the makeup is just about the same as the House. I wouldn't consider it either liberal or conservative. I think it's evenly divided. That was pretty well evidenced, I think, by the recent election of president. I think they divided forces then.
Is the
particularly among the majority party, because it was done in the caucus, you know.
Sure.
But it's generally accepted that the vote was very close, which indicates that the Senate is pretty well divided. There were times when a Senate president would be elected here 17-6 or 17-7. I mean, in the caucus. This one, I think, was about even.
If the two bodies are so close in ideology, is there a need for a second house?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, what's the role to play?
The same need for the second house that there is for Congress in the United States, because they're elected each 2 years over there, and they'll reflect the views of the people. Whereas the Senate's elected 4 years, and they do not change as often.
Do the built-in delays in the legislative system have any beneficial effect?
Oh, I would say so. They need a little more deliberation. I don't think you can pass bills too fast and get the best out of any legislation without considering them properly.
Has the Senate traditionally been a stepping stone to higher public office?
I'd say not. Many people have tried it, but outside of Senator Byrd, and I know of none that have been successful in the Senate.
We have had several, I suppose, from the House.
A number of candidates. There are a few from the House. Governor Underwood has been a former member of the House. Of course, Governor Meadows was a former member of the House. Senator Neely was a former clerk of the House. But in recent years, it's been a pretty poor springboard, I think, for high public office.
Why do you think that happens?
I don't know. Probably because most of those who attempt to go on to higher office have served from 2 terms to 5 terms, and there's so much on record that it's pretty easy to find something to say about them or against them or for them. They become controversial over the years. I think that has a lot to do with it, and they get pretty well stamped as to being liberal or conservative, whereas someone who is not connected and does not have a record of voting in the legislature can do a better job of electioneering and presenting himself to the people.